All right, Stallion, let's break down the E quadrant, right? The E quadrant is those who work for money. And this is someone that, you would be in the E quadrant if you receive a check from a business that you don't own. That check most likely has your taxes already withheld from it, maybe even some sort of insurance and things like that. And if you get a W-2 from that business, that's when you know you're in the E quadrant. So, in your eyes, what does an E quadrant person experience?
Well, I would say from an opportunity standpoint that they experience, they have perceived security, right? They don't have this overhead. They don't have the kind of the pressures of being a business owner. They can, I mean, and this isn't true for everybody. So these are kind of generalities I'm speaking, but to the most part, they can check in, they can check out at the end of the day, and they don't have to wonder how is payroll going to be paid? How is the insurance rates going up or down, or like, do I find good talent, and all these, business owner type questions. So, but I say perceived security because that's probably one of the biggest lies that we can believe is that, man, just being an employee makes everything secure. There's so many examples where, that can be shifting sand, especially depending on market and economy kind of shifts and turns. So that's how I break it down. Maybe somebody else has some other things to add.
Well, jump in there, Ern, because I asked him what are the opportunities or what's the experiences, and he talked about opportunities, and I think he described what a business owner experiences, and that the person working at that business doesn't have to experience that. But let's talk about opportunities. Like, what is the opportunity that you've been able to see that someone in the E quadrant would be able to have through this?
Yeah, because that paycheck is coming for services rendered, time on the job.
Yeah.
It's consistent, which means you get to spend your stress elsewhere if you so choose. Which means with the time left over in your family, you have the opportunity to invest there or in other things without the worry as much of bringing the job home, so to speak. No, I know many people do that. It's far easier as the E quadrant employee to not bring it home than the other quadrants, I believe. And so I do think there's an opportunity for less stress because there's more perceived stability, which means the E person can work on the other side, on the right side of the quadrant, with their time and mental capacity to develop businesses or make strategic investments. Those are some opportunities.
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before. Go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS.
Ben, jump in there. What's your take on this? Obviously, you worked in that E quadrant for many, many years.
Yeah. So this hits home significantly for me. For almost 30 years, I've been in the E quadrant. It started off as a necessity, and I'll get to that a little bit later with a story, a case study, if you will. But one opportunity that pertained to me as an employee in the military was to experience things on somebody else's dollar. So yes, I'm in the military. I'm getting a paycheck just like everybody's described, but I saw it a little bit differently. I saw it as the ability to travel the world, to get paid to skydive, to shoot machine guns, like all the cool guy stuff you see on your video games, I did in real life. And so for me, the E quadrant was a little bit different than maybe our blue collar folks that are potentially listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I worked in the E quadrant for 4 years. I never got to experience it. I think, when I was repoing cars, I felt like maybe I may have an opportunity to do a couple of those things, but
Near-death experiences, for instance. I mean, not everybody gets to do that on someone else's time.
right. Yeah, it seemed like it. Yeah, there's a lot of fun in there. Stallion, talk about pitfalls. What are some areas that maybe you feel like the E quadrant may experience, unfortunately?
Well, I think Probably one of the biggest ones that we've heard and experienced the most is this quadrant in particular has the least benefits from a tax standpoint, right? The tax code is ultimately not written in a way that benefits somebody in this quadrant. There's just not a lot of deductions. There's not a lot of things that they can take advantage of when you compare it to the other quadrants. And so I think that's a hindrance. And especially if you're a really high earning W-2, it can be a pretty painful, setback.
Yeah, I mean, everything's coming in as ordinary income, so you're going to pay at the largest marginal rates, depending on your income stream. And as you mentioned, like you probably are limited to most of just what the standard deductions are. You don't get those other benefits. I agree with that. One other thing I would say a pitfall potentially, right? Again, it depends on where you are, and not everyone is. I don't want to be generalizing it too much, but you've heard about water cooler talk. And if we're surrounded around other people who are not trying to learn these strategies that you're learning on this podcast and that you're implementing in your life, you're brought down to where they are as compared to being lifted up. And I think that's a pitfall. I mean, kudos to you as you're listening to this. If you're in the E-Quadrant and you're listening to this, man, how did you get to listen to this? That's amazing, because so oftentimes it's just not even on the radar, right? Like you said, Ernie, I just do my thing. I go to work, I leave at 5 and I'm out. And there's nobody around me, in the cube across from me that's saying, hey, by the way, did you listen to that What's About Wall Street podcast? I'm thinking about starting this land flipping business. So, I'm considering, buying a bunch of real estate now. That's just not the average conversation in the E-Quadrant. I think that's a pitfall. Any others you guys want to throw in there before we take off? Jump in there, Ern.
Yeah, I agree with you, Russ. And I would just mention, just in the last 2 weeks, I had a conversation and entered into a coaching situation with a guy who lives here in Alabama, who's a firefighter, who's telling me that exact thing. I wasn't asking, but just understanding what surrounds you, what are you coming out of, what are you looking to accomplish. He told me with the guys, while there is great camaraderie, and by camaraderie, it's talking crap to each other. When he started mentioning wanting to pursue the side business that he's developed with a business partner, that business partner not being a firefighter, but amongst the guys that he works with, he started to get the cold shoulder, or maybe a little bit of antagonistic speak, like he's doing something different, and therefore, well, that can't be good, or what's wrong with you? Are you really not doing that well here? Right? Are you needing some extra help? Just some of the down talk that he was experiencing, and he was lamenting that, knowing that he needed to, join another circle. But that definitely happens. That water cooler conversation, for better or for worse, is intended to keep you exactly where you are. That's a big downside of that E-Quadrant.
I would imagine too, some of that down talk, if you've been following the What's About Wall Street path and you're saying, hey, financial freedom starts when I have passive income that exceeds my monthly expenses, and I need every dollar I can to be sending that way. That probably means that you have opted out of the company's qualified plan, the 401k, the IRA. And people are like, what? I'm sorry? Why are you doing that? Ben, any other pitfalls that you want to chime in on before we move to the S quadrant?
Yeah. So, the author of the book, Robert Kiyosaki, even became an E for a period to learn a skill. He wanted to learn sales. So he went to Xerox to be the best sales guy he could possibly do, because he knew that was important, and not just the E quadrant, but all the quadrants, essentially, that could be argued. One pitfall I see as being an employee is the risk of solo economic dependency, as Mark Podolsky, our friend at the Land Geek, would say. If you're not working, you're not earning. You guys know my story about being in the hospital with my wife, and for a month we couldn't work. Thankfully, the military was still paying me, but can you imagine if my livelihood was fixated on me being at work? Well, now we have a month of no bills paid. I grew up with the employee mindset. I grew up around it. My family, my parents, and still to this day, they're employees in their mid 70s, and it's difficult. I had to go to work at a young age as a teenager to help pay the mortgage. And that's just the mindset that I was raised with. Work harder so you can earn more so that you can continue to work a lot of hours in hopes that you're going to be able to pay the bills. And so I see that as a threat, certainly a pitfall for anybody that's is not seeing that as a potential downfall for themselves.
Well, and I think that becomes perpetuating. I mean, like it gets passed down, and again, kudos to you for being one of those who is rising above. Right, you're not the average. You're the opposite of that. You're doing the opposite of what the average would do. And I do think that we see this constantly just pass down information, bad information to bad information to bad information, and that's how it continues to go. Let's move to the next quadrant. So if the E quadrant, Joey, works for money, the S quadrant works hard for money, right?
100%.
This is our self-employed. And I would say 99% of the people you talk to, if you say, hey, what do you do for a living? They say, I own this business, are self-employed, right? Most self-employed people have a business of some sort. They receive their income in a 1099 maybe, but they are fully in the business. They go from working 40 hours a week in someone else's business to working 80 hours a week in theirs. They go from being a technician in someone else's business to being a generalist in all things in their own. I mean, it is the thing that most people move from the E quadrant to the S quadrant. And you know who you are if this is you. Joey, talk a little bit about some opportunities that the S quadrant is experiencing or have opportunities for.
Yeah, I'll say the S quadrant is open to a lot more tax deductions and benefits that didn't exist in the E quadrant. I think that's definitely an opportunity that they can take advantage of. And I think the second thing that you mentioned is like when you work for someone, you feel like you're out of control in some cases. Hey, if this is what the company says we're going to do, that's what we have to do. And so that S quadrant it allows you to step into some autonomy, right? The ability to make some of the rules, to quote unquote be your own boss. Now, I think in some ways, as you mentioned, you become a generalist in your own business and you own your own job versus owning your own business. But I don't want to get into the pitfalls too quickly. I'm just saying you have some more autonomy and you have more tax benefits. That's how I see it.
All right. Ern, what would you say to this opportunities for the S quadrant?
Yeah, I think a lot of the S quadrant folks get there because they were working in a company and they said, I'm tired of solving this problem in this way. I want to solve this problem in my own way. And so that comes with some opportunity that you get to do it on your own. And when you do it on your own, you inherit, a list of additional problems, which could be opportunities. But what that does for you is it allows you to set your own hours. So rather than just spending the early mornings and evenings with your family, if you choose, you have that middle of the day where there's some opportunity for you to spend some time when you're not solving those problems. I think that's probably the two big drivers of why people end up there, solving your problems in your own way and having a little bit more opportunity. And I think that comes with that, and when you're taking on that risk, is the opportunity of income. When you're a self-employed person, your ability to earn is not limited by the number of hours you work. It's now dependent upon the amount of value that you bring to the hour. You choose how many hours that you work. So the income threshold can now jump up significantly, and rightly so. And so that creates huge opportunities for the self-employed person and their family.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the part where people realize, oh, wait a second, there's not a limit to how much money I could possibly make, right? Like there's opportunities well past what I could have gotten paid for if you possess those skills or willing to go gain those skills. And you start to see people investing in themselves, right? We talk about this all the time inside of our Passive Income Mastermind. The people who have decided that, man, I am tired of sitting in the same position I've always been in. I've got to start investing in myself. And when they make that decision, they say, I'm going to spend a minimum of 12 months in one of these masterminds, being on these calls three times a month, being in community with people at levels way higher than I'm at, which is forcing me to stretch my process of what's possible. And just like the call we were on yesterday, and somebody said, this is exactly why I show up to these, because now this one thing changes my future because I now have access to way more money than I would have had knowing this one level. And that's a direct result of investing in yourself. If you haven't made that decision to invest in yourself, jump on a call with one of our coaches. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/free call, and they can talk about not only where you are, but what is the investment that you can make in yourself to make 2025 a different than what 2024 was. Ben, talk a little bit about opportunities you see in the S quadrant.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. Have you ever heard the statement, "Oh, do what you love"? This is kind of that realm. This is when we're starting to get into the idea, the concept, the passion people have for making a business out of what they like doing. Entrepreneurs, right? This is kind of where we start jumping into that. And really, this group could be called the do-it-yourselfers. The folks that are like, you know what, I could do it better, like you alluded to earlier. And I think they're drawn to the S quadrant because of independence, maybe starting to have some of that time freedom. What you guys all broke down very expertly. I don't have to beat that dead horse.
Well, jump in there with pitfalls then. I'll give you first shot. I think we picked the bone pretty clean on opportunities. Give you an opportunity on the pitfalls here.
I think one of the big ones is going to be lack of delegation. So again, this is probably a business that you started and you're really passionate about it and nobody can do it as good as you. Maybe that speaks to you. Maybe that's part of what you're doing. So delegating tasks, things that are not growing your business, but hindering you, like for instance, me, I needed to hire out a bookkeeper. I can do the work. I like doing the work, but it's taking away from the opportunity to do other things on my business, not in my business. And so I think a lot of small business owners they're going to have a difficulty of delegating tasks out.
Well, Joey, jump in there. What are some pitfalls you see in the S quadrant?
Well, I'll just see the thing that I see all the time is because people are really good technicians, they believe they can run a business, but running a business and managing a business and running and managing people and recruiting and all those sort of things, that is not an inherent kind of skill set. It's something that you find out very quickly is at a high requirement in order to be successful. And I think that becomes one of the biggest ways and places that I see people struggle in the S quadrant is they don't have any of those skills. They never had to, they've never been challenged to. And the ones that make it develop in that area and the ones that don't, they just don't. Either they don't make it or they struggle or they have a severe cap on what they can do.
Well, here I want to give one case study, and then we'll go to the B quadrant. I remember when my wife was a dentist, I spent a lot of time working with dentists, and I would see those. I think like 98% of all dentists would go out and start their own dental practice or buy a dental practice already existing. So they went right into the S quadrant for the most part. And there was a good amount of the dentists, I would say 90% or more, that really didn't make that much money. They spent over $100,000, some of them $300,000 to get their educations, and they came out and the return on investment was not very good. Yet there was some out there, Joey, that were really good at doing all those things you were talking about. They knew how to delegate. They knew how to find the market to be able to, share the value with the world. And they made 10x what the rest of the 90% did. I think that the key is understanding where your strengths lie. So you shouldn't say, hey, how do I move from one to the other just because? You need to know who you are. There's a lot of reasons why certain people should be in one category and not in another. But if you don't understand what the opportunities are and the pitfalls, you may not know, oh, that would fit me or not fit me. Speaking of, let's go to the B quadrant. Most people think they're a B quadrant. B quadrant business owner is someone who runs and operates a company. Sometimes I think Robert Kiyosaki would say 500 employees or more. And he uses that as an example because if you're at that level, that means that you're not really involved in the day-to-day. You can't be, right? There's so many people doing the job. But the real kind of differentiator is someone who can leave the business for a year or more, come back, and the business still be growing. And I think that's where people are like, oh, well, if I was in the S quadrant, that would not work. My business would have been dead, 11 months before if I would have done that.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, pop quiz day. Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Joey, what are some of the opportunities you see for B?
Well, I'll say that they have a couple things that are really important to me is they're able to create massive value for others, right? Through employment, through the products that they produce, the value that they provide to the world at scale. When you're at that point, and I think, Russ, you and I have been saying, like, this is a goal for us. We want to be in that position. And it's because, man, there's so many people that we could employ, so many people that we could impact. They get to enjoy more time with their family as a result of leveraging other skill sets. I think the people that really fall into the B quadrant recognize that they are probably less talented than they started out thinking they were, and that they require the incredible talents of others to surround them. And the older I get, the more, gratefully, the more I see that.
Ern, what would you say here?
Yeah, Joey talked about the opportunities inside the company, so I'll bounce to the outside. But first, let me say this. We just moved over from the left side of the quadrant with the employee and the self-employed to the right side of the quadrant, the business owner and investor. The left side of the quadrant trades time for money. The right side of the quadrant trades people, processes, systems, or money for time. So the outside of the business owner enjoys time, where the E and the S enjoy their time in the margins. The business owner gets to enjoy their time in the majority. And the question is, what is that business owner going to do with their time? They can choose to continue to work in the company, or they can leave the company for a while and go take on other projects. And if they're passionate about making an impact and having influence in their company, I can imagine the things that they would want to have influence and impact outside of the company too. That's driven by a bottom line that isn't necessarily denominated in dollars. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to have a vision to grow. Maybe you're not 100% fitting in that business owner box where you have 500 employees and can leave for a year. But maybe you're getting closer to that, and that is buying back more of your time. You can possibly have more impact in your business and outside of your business. That's a huge deal.
Well said. Ben, how about for you? What would you say in this big B quadrant?
Man, it's so tough to go after Ernie when he crushes an answer like that. But I'll give it a shot. So when we're talking about B owners, we're talking about folks that are, they ask the question, who can I hire to do this? Not like, how can I do this, but who do I know that can do this? And I see that one of the big opportunities for business owners is entity structures and generational wealth. So in our right next thing grid that we have in the community, and I walk our coaching clients through this, the two end pillars are more of our defensive postures is tax strategy and structures and planning. It's what big business owners on the right side of the quadrant are able to start doing to protect their family, protect their generational wealth. And I mean, we've all heard the stories of the Rockefellers and Vanderbilts and all these great names, the Fords. That's really what I see as an opportunity as a big business owner is creating something and then protecting it.
Well, and I think one of the things I see a big opportunity for a business owner is that they actually have something to sell. People make the mistake of thinking people want to buy your business, and that's not true. People want to buy the process and systems in which your business runs off of.
Right.
So for most S quadrant people, they don't own the systems, right? They are the system. So unless I'm buying you and the business, it's not worth a whole lot to me, right? I can't replicate generally the founder of the business very easily. So that's why it's so hard to move from the S quadrant. That's why so few people actually end up selling their business because there's nothing to sell. But people make the mistakes or leading to pitfalls. The mistake that they make is believing that their business will be their quote unquote retirement plan. But yet when they get to that age where they're, all right, I don't want to do the business anymore. I've been running this service-based company here. Let's take it to market. And people are like, show me your processes and systems. You're like, you're looking at them. I mean, that doesn't work, right? Like, because at that point in time, you don't want to work anymore. And most people are not willing to pay a whole lot because they're at risk thinking, well, if you quit, if you stop working it, the business is going to fold. All the goodwill, all the processes and intellectual capital exists within you. So that's a pitfall I think people have. And so an opportunity in the B quadrant is that they get there. But on the flip side of that, Stallion, is that we've seen this because we have a number of these people who've big B business owners who've sold businesses that are residing in our passive income mastermind. And they've told me the stories, right? One of them ran several $100 million a year revenue company, and he had a business partner who left for a year, and the business kept running. So again, good criteria, right? I think 1,000, 1,500 employees, and he came back after the year, and he was talking to his buddy, his business partner, said, well, what do you want to do? And the guy said, let's sell the company. So they did. They sold the company. Great. One revelation is that, hey, I don't want to own this company anymore. Two, I have a company that people will buy, and they did. They sold it for a large amount of money. I think it was large 8 figures. But on the opposite side is that person then was trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life. And I have another guy in our passive income mastermind do the exact same thing. He didn't know what he was going to do. He sold the business without a plan. So a pitfall of being a big business owner is not knowing what you're going to do next, because it's not going to be right off into the sunsets and drink Mai Tais on the beach. What else would you add to that?
Well, I would just say one of the pitfalls is with anything, if you start to delegate and hire out, there's a chance that you could become disconnected, right? And I see that sometimes even with, we're not even there yet, but I feel like there's certain things that you have to let go of. And there's a unless you have built-in ways to keep tabs on stuff, you can become disconnected. And I also think it's hard to find people that are attracted to your vision and the ultimate intention of your company, that unless you really create the culture that would be perpetuated with or without you. And that's hard to do. Culture is not something that there is a certain amount of it that's a default, but a lot of it has to be developed. It has to be intentionally created. And that's hard. It just takes a lot of effort and a lot of, picky choices of people that you want to come work for you.
Like my pleasure.
Exactly. Everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A's culture has been translated down. Ernie, give me a pitfall for the big B.
Yeah, I think anybody who accomplishes something big and great, like big revenues, big team, big profit, big impact, whatever it is the temptation to get puffed up, like look at who I am. And, there is a level of just reality that, yeah, something great did happen, and it probably did take some of your skill to do that. And who you are now is a growth of who you were before all this started. But the pitfall is for the person to overthink about that. And pride comes before the fall, so to speak. And no matter what you think of yourself in your business, it's probably going to translate to other areas of your life, like your family. And so if you think you're the greatest thing and you start interjecting some of those thoughts, words, actions on your spouse, that's not going to go great, probably. I've never had that problem. But pride, I think, is a potential pitfall when you have some measure of success. So you have to really guard yourself against that.
All right, let's move to the next. So if the E quadrant works for money, the S quadrant works hard for money, the B quadrant have others working for money, the I quadrant, the investor, professional investor, has money working for money, right? This is truly where most of people listening to this podcast, I think, Stallion, probably want to get to at some point, where they're just being a professional investor. So speak to the opportunities for this person.
I have to say, I think the tax ramifications for an investor are some of the most favorable. If not from the B quadrant and the I quadrant, both, those are definitely the best. And the thing that I think about the most is if you want your time, the investor quadrant is where you live, because you have traded dollars for someone else's systems, for someone else's overhead, management. All these things are now turnkey. They've been done for you, and you're able to then leverage your dollars that are valuable to that investment, that business, whatever's behind it. And that is the ultimate leverage of time. So those are the opportunities that I see, is tax and time.
How about for you, Ernst?
Or will the person who does this, well, Joey, great term, professional investor, the person who becomes a professional investor and really lives in that quadrant is skilled, is developed, there's a level of sophistication. They're good at what they do, and likely having success from that. They're sending their dollars out, and those dollars are coming back with friends more often than not. And what that creates is the opportunity to have some level of attraction in the marketplace. If that's what you're doing and you share that with others, people are interested in that. And so the inherent opportunity behind that is that you can bring people to opportunities. You could possibly bring people's capital to those opportunities and get paid to do that, further enhancing your life in the investor quadrant. So huge opportunity there to do that.
Ben, add a little on the opportunity side, but also tell me a little bit some pitfalls you see for the I quadrant.
Yeah. So the only thing I'd add to opportunities, the realm where you get to be creative. Some of these other quadrants, like you have to show up to work to be an employee, right? In the investor quadrant, you might not have some of the resources, i.e. money or the time or whatever, but you get to partner up with people that have that. So if you're talking about syndicating funds, or if you're talking about using OPM, which if you're not familiar with that term, it's one of my favorites. It's called other people's money. Using other people's money to go along with your money to invest in bigger things than you could have done on your own. So I think that's a huge opportunity as an investor. One pitfall that I would definitely bring up is if you're not coming to the investor quadrant educated or with mentorship, you could easily be deceived. I mean, I'll call what it is, Dogecoin. There was a big pump on Dogecoin a year or two ago where I remember picking up some windows for my house, and the guy loading my windows into my trailer was like, "Hey man, have you invested in Dogecoin yet?" I'm getting investment information from a guy that probably shouldn't be, speculating. So there's pitfalls there with, coming to this educated and recognizing what true opportunities are in investing, not just speculation.
But you're talking about doggy coin. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
I mispronounced it. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't invest in that for a while because I had 2 dogs and I thought, man, I don't need any more dogs. So I don't need any doggy investments.
That was probably wise.
He called it Dogecoin. I was looking to buy Ford coin, or, Chrysler coin.
Hey, I heard that the Dodge Charger was the #1 stolen vehicle. I didn't need any more of that.
Like I said, education, fellas.
All right, chime in there, Stallion. What last pitfalls can you see for the I quadrant that we haven't already touched on?
Man, I want to go a little bit deeper on the education piece, because early success as an investor does not promise future success. If you haven't really become an investor. And again, that's the deceptive part that Ben was talking about. But I want to be clear, just because you start to receive a little bit of return on your capital, if the foundation of your investing strategy is not solid, you can start to see things because again, people, they find that you're an investor, they're going to send you opportunities. Opportunities find cash, but it doesn't mean that good opportunities find cash. It just means opportunities. And we've been an open book to you about our own investing journeys, and they haven't all turned out really good because we find out later that we didn't do the depth of due diligence that it really requires of you. If you're going to be a great investor, you got to know the operator so well. You can't just go off of a pro forma. You can't just go off of a capital raiser or a promoter's word or their webinar. Like, you got to be close to that investment, and you need to do a fair amount of really in-depth analysis. And if you're not that person, man, you got to have somebody on the team that is. Otherwise, you're going to be deceived.
Well, I think what you described is what our mentor Nelson Nash would say a lot too. When you talked about just early success doesn't mean that you'll have great success later. And I think the flip side is that, losing money doesn't mean you always lose money. I think it's probably the person who loses money early will become the better investor of the two. Nelson said maybe the worst thing that could happen to someone if they walked into a casino, never been in a casino, took a quarter out of their pocket, put it into the little slot machine, pushed the button. Used to be you'd pull down the lever and it hit jackpot, right? Like, that creates a disease that people continue to chase. And financial freedom is not like this get rich quick thing. It's a process of following very strong principles over and over and over again. And one of the quotes that I don't think a lot of people know, and I was recently introduced to it, we hear Warren Buffett as being one of the greatest investors of all time. And there's this saying that Warren Buffett talks about, rule number 1 is don't lose money. Rule number 2 is to see rule number 1. But I don't think most people know that one of the quotes, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't have it sitting right in front of me, that Warren Buffett said is that if you're not willing to lose 50% of the money in the market, you should not be an investor at all. And I don't think a lot of people take on that to heart. They don't go into the market believing and willing to lose 50%. And that's what they would say the greatest investor of all time. That is a quote. You can Google it. I did. All right, Aaron, I'll let you wrap us up as we finish this topic.
Yeah, good word. On the investor thing, financial freedom is a formula, passive income greater than monthly expenses. So financial freedom is a formula, but it's not just about solving the formula. It's also about formation. It has just as much to do with the person and who they are as where you are solving that formula. Now, about the I quadrant, it's awesome. Everybody wants to be in the I quadrant. It's super cool. Trade money for time. That's awesome. The temptation there, maybe the downside of that, is if you're sitting in that E or S quadrant and you're trying to navigate to financial freedom, if you only focus on the appeal of the I quadrant, you might miss the B quadrant. And I believe for many people, I would almost say for most, that might be a little strong. But for many people, the greatest path that they have to building real wealth that can then lead them into the I quadrant is bolstering their work in the S quadrant or building their self-employed business into that true business owner category. Because that's the thing that they're already doing, or the thing that they know the most about. That's the thing that has the biggest and fastest income potential that could then lead them into the I quadrant. And for people just staring at the I quadrant, trying to get there, it may jump them over a step that is maybe more meaningful sooner.
Oh, good stuff. Well, Ben, Ern, Stallion, thank you so much for joining into the conversation. Thank you for listening, Tribe. Hopefully you found value in this. There's something that you could take away, whether it's just a mindset piece, maybe it's a pitfall to be watching out for, or maybe, hey, there's an opportunity. That's why I should be continuing to strive to maybe move out of the quadrant in which I'm in today. We would love to have you join our community. If you're not already in it, go to westwallstreet.com/community so that you can be surrounded with other people on the same journey that you're on, which is to become financially free as fast as possible. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.